I would really love a wolf. It would be
Well,
such an honor to walk beside a wolf. They're not easy.
people have like hybrid wolves. My friend has a wolf slash like a terrier, not terrier, like a shepherd wolf slash shepherd mix.
Hmm.
So you can certainly do like that. I don't know about full blown wolves, but we have coyotes around here too. We can tap into that energy.
The wild and the feral is where it's at. I had an experience many years ago. I was hiking with a group of friends, all guys, and we were down at this gorge. This was in Western New York. Sorry, I was just listening to something. Um, and we hear this crying, and we're just like, "Wow, this sounds like a kid." So we climb up this cliff, right? And all of a sudden, there's this fawn, this baby deer, and she somehow fell and she was stuck right on this little ledge, this cliff. And so one of my friends picked her up, and she was just freaking out. And then I was like, "Hey, let me hold her." And he put her in my arms, and she, was resisting and fighting it. She pissed on me, and then there was just this moment where we just had this heart to heart connection, and I looked in her eyes, and she looked into mine, and she just surrendered and just
Hmm.
allowed me to carry her for like 20 minutes. It was rough terrain. And
Wow.
I remember saying that day, that was the closest I've ever come to like touching, the feet of God. So there's just something really precious about um, the feral, the wild, such a deep respect. And I think that's what we're being called back to, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if I just sit outside and feel you can feel any of it. Like I used to, I used to have in my head the thing about nature where it's like you think about the amazing parts, like you think about Half Dome or Yosemite or the Grand Canyon, sort of like the dramatic elements of it, but you just go sit on your own lawn, and like look at the grass and look at how bugs interact with it. You have
Yeah,
you have instant
that's where it's
relief,
at.
right? You have instant like relief from the society ego mind nasty thing, just instantly.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did yesterday. This week has been really powerful. I'm just like situating myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going through I did this Facebook Live the other night, and then I had this experience, and it brought some stuff up for me, and I could see myself resisting. And the next morning I woke up, I brought my kids to school, and I was just like, I need to go into nature, but I couldn't leave the city. So I just found a park, I found a tree, and I just laid under there for like 2 hours, just crying and just opening and letting myself just unfold. And I was just watching, I had my head like on the roots of the tree, and I was just watching the ants and
Mm-hmm.
just this micro, environments, and feeling so deeply connected. And it always reminds me how much we need this. I was working with a client the other day, and he was spinning out, and he's just like, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so overwhelmed. And I'm like, when's the last time you've been in nature? I'm like, I don't know. And I was like, yeah, just go to a park, take off your shoes, and put your feet on the earth. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, you'll notice a tremendous shift in like a couple minutes. I hope that, maybe he will do that.
It is as simple as that, and it's like instant relief. It's just we get caught up in our heads, but it's like a doorway inside of your mind. I'm even inside of the box room with all the corners, and it's like cube technology and all that bullshit, right? But like I can go in my mind outside to where the trees and the birds and everything is, it's like one rhythmic sort of like pulsation that you can mentally just, like, I can go there instantly. You just forget that you can do that though.
Why do you forget?
I think for me personally, it's because like Og has said before that the people in a city, it's like this metal city, this metal forest, right? Everyone's connected with circuitry, and it's like all of
Artificial circuitry,
yeah,
right?
all of their. I've made this analogy before, but like the mecha, the that cube thing, and all the people arranged around it, they look like iron filaments, like how it would arrange around a magnet. It's like the thoughts get entrained to this pattern, and then everyone sort of throbs on that beat, but it's like a downer beat. It's a discordant sort of like screech rather than the nature one, which is a hum. It's a pleasant sort of hum, and it's not. I don't think it's something that consciously we sit here and be like, oh well, I'm gonna spend this much time in the screeching, and I'm gonna spend this much time in the the pleasant humming state. It's just whatever's more powerful around you, and including however much stuff you've done internally to be able to sort of even notice the difference
Hmm.
and to tell yourself, because sometimes if it can be like a slippery slope thing where you have one bad feeling and you entertain that and then you go into that and then all of a sudden 10-15 minutes later you're in full-blown depression mode and you don't even realize that it happened.
There it is, brother. That's exactly it. Thank you for saying that. And having that awareness is key, right? Because we're human and we have our moments where we step out of presence and we get identified with that thought. And sometimes it's fun,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes those thoughts are really interesting.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
I'm like, ooh, that's an interesting thought. I want to roll with that for a little bit.
right.
And then I do, and then I'll get a little spiraled out, and then I'll be like, Ashley, come back, let go.
Yeah, yeah. It's slippery though. It's I mean the power of those thought forms to entrain is it's beyond something like everybody has an experience up to the most level. I've experienced what I feel is like the most possible amount of power that you could put into like an entrainment system. And then there's levels that start off at just like very slight suggestions, like if alcohol is your weakness and you have like a thought of a beer or a like label, and then that starts something, even if you don't act on it immediately, somewhere down the road you're gonna go get it or something. The same thing with the emotions, like it starts off very like a hint, and then it goes all the way down depending on whether you're traversing the layers of hell or not. If you're doing that, then it becomes like the force of a locomotive, and at some point you can't do anything about it. Like if you let yourself get that far, you're just in for that ride until that ride's over, basically.
Yeah, I know that story really well. I have a lot of compassion for it, especially with my own history and my recovery from addiction and still recovering. And um, when I was when I've been knee deep in my lapsing, right? Because I really got sober in 2012,
Mm-hmm.
and right after my dad died. My dad died from pretty much alcohol, and I spun out. I drank really heavily. I was communicating with him like it was a lot going on. I'm still integrating that because there's a lot there.
Yeah.
And I came back to Vermont where I was living at the time. Got really, really wasted one night. Woke up the next day and was like, I wrote myself a letter, like a commitment letter.
Yeah.
And I had my mom was there and I had her sign it and it was really powerful. But I've lapsed a couple times after that. And there's one point I remember being like, um, why do I keep doing this? Like I'm a really beautiful human, and I'm like, I know it's trauma, like I'm looking at it in every way. I was really trying to dissect it. And sometimes it's dangerous because we get stuck in the mind. And it's also could be like a little bit of an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter because that journey has taught me so much and it's brought me so much compassion. I don't really even like to use the word addict. It has such a stigma attached to it. Um, I don't I appreciate the medical model, the disease model of addiction. I understand that there's a lot of genetics involved and absolute biochemistry, but there's a lot more. And I feel like that it's a little bit watered down in the medical community, like most things.
Yeah.
The, the things that I would just, it would feel like I was being pulsed, okay?
Hmm.
Like there was like a thought form that just came, and we talk about this of the addiction mind, and the mind will do anything and make any excuse in the book to use again.
Yeah.
But I started to feel like those, it wasn't even me, and it was, right, because I have to take responsibility. I'm not, even with all of the psychological warfare and the frequency warfare, I still have to take responsibility. Now they definitely can exploit our weaknesses. They know we're weak. They kind of know our trauma sometimes more than others. So there are a lot of forces at play, but at the end of the day, we got to show up and be like, yeah, I have the power. I am powerful. I
Hmm.
am not powerless to those sensations, because that's what I found it was really about. Even though, and I know in the AA model, they're like, you're powerless, I'm powerless, I'm powerless. And I'm just like, that's a really fucked up thing to affirm.
Right.
That doesn't feel right for me.
Yeah, that was weird for
I
me
felt it
too.
was more like I needed to surrender to love.
Hmm.
But one of the things that's helped me a lot, I was talking to a friend about this the other day. I said, they say thoughts precede emotions. You think that's true? And he was like, no, I don't think that's true. He's like, because, as bioelectric beings, we're getting sensory input all the time. And mind is trying to, our mind assesses the data coming in, and it picks from the subconscious what it knows, and it forms symbols and images and then builds like thoughts, right? And I thought
Yeah.
that was an interesting perspective, and it made a lot more sense, of the addiction patterns, and being able to, again, always coming down to deeper compassionate awareness. The struggle is real, and I'm grateful that you even brought it up, because I think it's something that we need to talk more about. We really need to talk about addiction more.
We need to talk about everything more. Like, as a, you know what I'm
Fuck yeah.
saying? Like, as a community, and I know, our particular little thing that we have going has been labeled and divide and conquered and all the other same bullshit that always happens. But the fact that we have any platform to speak on right now is, to me, is something that needs to be taken seriously and actually utilized while it's still around, because we might be headed for 1984 and thought police and all this other bullshit. So we have to actually, like, we gotta do what we can do while we can still do it.
What so yes, I do think that we need to talk about it, everything. I have a passion for talking about what it's been coming through me lately is addiction and sex. Those are the two things that, sexuality. And
Hmm.
sexuality encompasses us. It's not just sex, right?
Yeah,
These
right.
are two things that like are really not talked about a lot, and I still see a huge gap even on social media, and I'm like, this is really interesting. Um,
Yeah.
and these are delicate things, because this goes into the core of shame,
Hmm.
where people have held the most amount of shame regarding their sexuality and regarding addiction. The two go hand in hand, and then our sexuality as a collective species has been very exploited, very. Um,
Yeah.
and in that, I'm holding the highest vision for the collective healing of humanity around sexuality, and I feel like um, a lot of that healing, addiction will naturally be healed as well.
Yeah. 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 Um, you know Osho, right? Bhagwan.
Yeah.
Yeah, Osho. I don't know if you remember. He always has these little parable type things, and he had one where he was talking with one of his students or followers, and uh, or they were rooming together, and the guy, like, saw that Osho wasn't smoking. He saw that he didn't drink, and so this guy smoked cigarettes. So he was trying to, like, not smoke around him and trying not to let himself smell like it. And when Osho figured out what he was doing, he was like, no, like, smoke immediately, like right here, like do it, and do it consciously. He's like, look at yourself while you're holding this thing and focus on your breath, the feeling of the burning air coming into your lungs and the feeling of it going out, and just be there with it. And he was like, if you do this consciously every single time you smoke a cigarette, if it's actually harmful for you, then very naturally your body will say, don't do that anymore. Rather than what people do when they're smoking cigarettes. Normally, as far as I can tell, it's a stress thing. Like, they're usually taking their half-hour break at work, and they're de-stressing, and their mind is going somewhere pleasant, but it's not like they're not present. They're going to some pleasant place, but not the present place. So then it's still not an actual witnessing of what they're doing with it. And Osho was just saying, just do whatever you want, but know what you're doing, and when you're doing it, be there with it, like fully be there with it.
Absolutely. As somebody who smoked a bunch in my life, I found when I was really looking at it, I was like, well, and it's such a taboo and a stigma, man. You want to talk about shame?
Yeah.
And it's funny because I know more and more people like who feel comfortable with me, and they smoke, and they're like, I just always feel so much shame, and I was like, who cares? Like,
Right.
be respectful and mindful of being around others. Smoke organic tobacco, ideally. There is medicine in it. It is a powerful medicine, and I don't think it's meant for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I found that when I would smoke, that's when I was actually doing my deep breathing, and it
Yeah.
was a breathing tool. How ironic was that? And so then you stop smoking, and then you realize, oh man, I've been having this really shallow, shitty breathing. I better, breathe deep, because
Yeah.
breath, man, breath is life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the breath is powerful, and we can journey, we can go very deep into beautiful spaces, and we can regulate our nervous system. I taught myself how to get out of anxiety attacks. I used to have them very severely in my mid 20s, to the point where some days I couldn't even leave my house. Like, it was my PTSD was that intense, and I eventually learned using rhythm. Like, so I'm a very kinesthetic person. I regulate a lot by moving, and so it was rhythm and patterns and breath. And so it would
Mm-hmm.
go like, I would be breathing deep, a certain type of a breath technique, while also sitting there and like drumming on my legs. And for some reason, that would help me like come right back in my body.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Whatever works.
yeah. I've done. I don't know if you knew this about me, but I sort of promote breath work, like holotropic breath work. I've done I've done a retreat in Joshua Tree, California, where it was like a 5-day retreat, and they do holotropic breath work. And Stan Groff is the one that coined this. He started this whole
Yeah.
movement back in the 80s or something, and now there are centers everywhere. But they treat the whole thing as like an LSD trip. Like, they treat it as if you're going off into non-ordinary. They call it non-ordinary consciousness, and every single person who's doing breath work has a sitter. So there's someone on the mat doing breath work, and then there's someone who, they've met during the thing and they feel comfortable with each other, and they're literally trip sitting you while you breathe. That's all you're doing. You're listening to music and you're breathing. And these people go off into all kinds of altered states of consciousness, and they go into their subconscious, and they have what's called the inner healer, I think. And that's just the part of you that knows how, basically like how your hand knows how to fix itself if you scrape it or something, right? So this is the part that fixes your spiritual part that's broken through breath work. And you have someone who sits with you through that, half an hour to an hour long, however long it is, actually a couple hours sometimes. And then when everybody comes back, then they give you this thing called a mandala. It's like just a circle that's drawn piece of paper, and you get crayons, and you get like markers, and you just basically draw out whatever you saw during your trip, and you kind of integrate and have a big discussion with everyone else, and you kind of like look into what you saw during that deep dive.
Wow, that sounds like an amazing experience. I would love
Yeah,
to participate in something like that.
yeah,
I know
yeah.
I've gone really deep alone. My one friend and I a couple weeks ago, he taught me this breath technique. We were sitting on my couch doing it, and I could feel it was yes, I felt very psychedelic, and I started to feel a little anxious.
Mm-hmm.
And I was grateful to have him there, but he was doing it at the same time, and I feel it would have been more advantageous if like he was sitting with me and like holding that container, because
Yeah,
you can go very deep.
you
What's
can.
cool about what you said is that actually it is a trip, and I don't remember the book. I have it in my living room. I read about half of it. It's like a 450 page. It's very dense. It's um it's a really phenomenal book, and it he goes into some of the research about, and again, I don't remember names, but a guy who was doing experiments and testing for individuals for rebirthing, like spiritual, soulful rebirthing,
Mm-hmm.
using LSD as the tool.
Okay.
And eventually he lost his funding. They wouldn't fund it because it used to, they used to be able to do that.
Right.
There's another guy who did that. He wrote a book, The Center of the Cyclone. He was MD researcher, and he was holding sensory deprivation containers and like going intravenously injecting himself with LSD and just figuring out the mind
Yeah, yeah.
and the inner dimensions and how to travel in them. But anyways, this other guy learned. He said, "Well, all my funding got lost. I'm going to stay in ethics, and I'm not going to use LSD. What now?" And it was breath work.
Mm-hmm.
And he was finding, that breath work can release the DMT and be pretty much up to par as a psychedelic.
Maybe we're talking about the same guy. Is his name Stan Groff?
I have to look at my book.
It could be the same guy because like
It's
that.
probably the same guy.
Yeah, I mean that's his whole. That was his whole thing, was he wanted a natural method to be able to use the deep dive as a more holistic practice of observation rather than like Hamish. I don't know if you know Hamish, but he had this guest on the other day that did a good description of the sort of drug versus the natural one, where he was like, this guy gets an expedition together. He wants to climb Everest. Spends all his time training, years and years training. He finally gets the date and the time and his body correct, and he finally does the thing. It takes him forever, however long it took him, a year, and then it took a week to climb it. He finally reaches the top. He like plants his flag or whatever, and then like 5 minutes later, like a helicopter flies up with his buddy, and just his buddy jumps out, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm here too. This is great." And it's like, yeah, you could actually be seeing the same exact scene, like visually, but the whole underlying process, which gives you appreciation for it, somehow is missing. And I think like that can be how it is. I don't want to just like mash on drugs because like everything has its place, but to kind of like do the grind, I guess. And to me, it's really being able to face those little parts of you that are weak. Like if you're trying to do self work, if you're trying to say do a routine in the day, and you just know there's a part of you that is just going to say, well, let's just tweak this part of it. We can allow this, and you're so used to just giving into that and feeling okay with it because you didn't break any big rule, right? It's like being able to see that come up and then having the strength to say no, feel the pain, because if you're doing something like that, it's going to be painful. You can't like actually do self work without it being painful. And then letting those things like build up, right? And then eventually you're at the top of Everest or whatever it is you're trying to do, and you did it because like you did all that work. You went through all the pain, you went through all the tears, all the the ripping your flesh and all that, right? So it's a different experience.
Yeah, it's a beautiful process. And I am grateful for the external mind, psyche altering, you know, medicines. Um, and I also am aware that they can be dangerous
Mm-hmm.
and a slippery slope. And we have a huge culture right now, especially with the Western world or the gringos and the ayahuasca, man, and it's huge. And I've never done ayahuasca. I started acid was my first. I was doing it in high school, and then I did mushrooms a couple years after that, and then I didn't touch any psychedelic,
Mm-hmm.
cannabis or anything for like 8 years. And I have done microdosing this past year with mushrooms. I really appreciate them, but I can only do it in nature. Doing it in a city, um, because I just see so much already. I I could like I was watching beings that didn't have my highest regard, kind of looking through this interdimensional window, seeing if they can get in when I was in the city. And it was cool that
Mm-hmm.
I was aware, and I was like, you ain't coming anywhere near. But in nature, it's a lot safer.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not in a good space, if we're not really in our presence, like it can be dangerous. And I've worked with a lot of people who've gone through some really bad trips, and they came back, uh, you know, real fucked up. Ultimately, it's always a learning lesson. We can always get ourselves back on the path. But I'll tell you one thing. So in my community, um, I'll vend at shows. I create these herbal elixirs, and it's kind of an alternative. A lot of people go out and they go see a show, and they want to drink or whatever. And so I make these elixirs with a lot of love and a lot of power, and that can help people, let down their guard a little bit, get more comfortable, calm the nervous system, get deep into their body without the use of something that's going to give them a hangover the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was vending a show a couple months ago, and I knew that I was taking a risk because it was that eclipse that happened. It was the
Uh,
night of the eclipse, and I was like, usually like I'm gonna be inside and I'm not gonna even really be out too much, but it was an ecstatic dance show, and I was like, I gotta go. I need to dance too. And there was a kid there who took like 4 hits of acid, and he was fully possessed and hijacked. I've
wow.
never seen anything like it. And I went outside, and he's screaming and he's freaking out, and I was like, oh shit, here we go. And I could see the being that was possessing him, and he was having a really hard time. We brought him in the back. We covered him with blankets. I was talking to my one friend. I was like, yo, like, what do you do? Like, how can we support this kid? Apparently, he also took a Xanax bar, like, not good energy. He's foaming at the mouth. He's
Wow.
not even talking. He's like convulsing. And, we had all these powerful people just surrounding him, and he was having a hard time, and we were having a hard time. And I was feeling frustrated because of all my work. I'm like, there's nothing I can do. And I don't even think I was in the space that night to be that container.
Mm-hmm.
I called a friend, and my friend is great. I love him so much. He loves Krishna. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he, he follows that path, and he's also very expansive. Like, he's not rigid or dogmatic whatsoever. And so I said, yo, there's this guy, and he's freaking, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna come over. And he was there earlier that night, but he came back. He comes in the back room, and he's like, everybody, let's hold hands. And he says this prayer, and we say it with him, and boom, that kid just came back.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, that's power right there. Like, I was like, I don't know what kind of Krishna work you're doing, but all right, that's cool.
Yeah.
um,
Right.
I don't know, but the kid came back, and it was bad. Like, we thought we were gonna lose him. So those are the extreme examples of, a lot of people especially young people, like the psychedelic world has become just like another party fucking culture, man. And they're abusing and they're using it for the wrong reasons. They don't know how to go into sacred ceremony and to open the container and to communicate and work with the plant spirit. Some people out there say that all plants and all psychedelics, like it's so bad, like everything can get hijacked.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I see that possibility, but I also don't see that because as an herbalist and as somebody who works a lot with nature, I have I just I have been so blessed by the earth and her medicine and herbs, and I'm not talking about psychedelics, just nettle tea or something like
Yeah,
that.
right,
And I
right.
journey with their spirit, and they've been such great teachers. So always discernment is key. That's for sure. I also just want to say that two things that I observe about addiction. One um, is it in a lot of ways the pain and the trauma can feel so overwhelming that yes, we want to numb to certain degrees. It's truly a self medication, and in anything we should have compassion. We should have deep compassion and say what is the larger message here. So some of us who are on the path and are still struggling with addiction, I think sometimes we go so deep because we're doing the work, and then it's just like, whoa, this is too intense. I'm gonna numb out a little bit, and almost so
Right.
like we can even be with that immense of pain because not everybody's doing this work here. Not everybody came to planet Earth to do this work. It's very apparent.
Definitely not.
So there's this need, there's this definitely this individual need. However, I think that there is something in our genetics, like we have these receptor sites because our ancestors have been using these medicines for a very long time. We have co-evolved with plants.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a great book that I have called Wild Hunger. And he's looking at getting to the root of addiction. And what he is seeing is that it is this inner longing for community, for
Mm-hmm.
ecstatic connection, for being in that tribe again, and journeying as multidimensional beings and having that unification. And this extreme isolationism producing this extreme loneliness that is just not holistic whatsoever. Nature, just look at fucking nature. Nature is a big community.
I know.
Nature thrives and relies on interdependence. Without interdependence and diversity, nature would that's when the planet collapses. Okay?
Yep.
That's why we see some of the reasons why they've wanted to, homogenize everything. And how you clear cut a diverse ecosystem and you plant corn, wheat, and soy, and you just fucked it all up, and then you got all these pests, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you got all of this disease coming up. Well, of course, disease comes when the environment has been out of balance and disrupted. Same with us.
Yep.
So I feel like he really hits it, and that's why we have to have compassion and need to have more compassion, empathy-based models of care in this world that really look at what's going on with addiction. It's a cry for help. It's a cry for unity and connection, not only with ourselves but with each other. You know how many people and maybe you experienced it, but especially those of us who've been traumatized sexually, which most of us have had that because we're here on planet Earth. And a lot of people could only have sex when they were drinking, right? Because something loosens up and they feel a little bit confident and they can open their heart more. And yeah, that might sound distorted, but we just got to see it as it is. It's not healthy, and it's dangerous, as we know, to do that because you're just calling in all the peoples, all the beings.
And
But
you're calling in babies possibly.
yeah, calling
Right.
it babies. I'm grateful to say that my two children, I had them when I was very, very, very sober. I conceived them in a very sober and actually very, you know, present state of consciousness.
Yeah. That's a good
But
thing.
I Yeah, that's something that I feel like we should really remember. Like our ancestors, which we are our ancestors, we used to get together and have, these journeys with plant medicine, psychedelics, and we would go deep and we would connect to many, many, many things. I think we live in times now, though, that things have shifted so much. The veil is so much thinner that, again, like you said, like all we, using breath and focus and awareness, we are the psychedelic.
Right, right.
We are the psychedelic. I am the
Definitely.
ayahuasca. I am the psilocybin. I am the cannabis.
Yeah, that was something that I realized at some point, and also Duncan Trussell said the same thing himself, where he was like, every conversation is a psychedelic experience, like with someone who's awake, because like it took sort of substances for me to see that it was true, but then when I came back from the substances, I realized like the conversation is so vast. It's barely possible to even touch what's happening there if you're not like in it. And along with the train of thought as well, because like you're touching so many different things in every single sentence. And it's a lot of it is done subtly and with knowledge of what the other person is and feels and where they come from and all that stuff. And most is said without words, and then the words themselves have multiple meanings and definitions, and then those create variation trees, which just like chess, like it branches out so far that like this one conversation, you it's impossible to describe, but it's a multi-dimensional thing, just having a very simple conversation. You can always access that. You don't need drugs. You might trip out if you have drugs, because like it's so vast and deep anyway without any of that.
So I fully agree. And for a lot of people who can't feel that yet, um, how can we support them? And this goes back to shame, I feel. When I play around in the shame realm, I see it almost as a black goo.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's very sticky, it's
Mm-hmm.
very mucusy, it's binding, but it's also self-protective. There is a
Yeah.
purpose to it, and it does exist because if you have the capacity to feel and to be empathetic, then you might feel some feelings of shame when you make a mistake.
Right.
The toxic, the toxic
All
shame
shame
is
isn't bad. The church took it and made everybody feel guilty for existing in the first place, which is like the most heinous, like cruel joke you could play on anybody. But I mean, the fact is we've been playing this game called life for like forever and a half, because there's nothing else to do. So we're really fucking good at like, you know, fucking ourselves over because we like it. Like in the end of at the end we like it because we've been. It's just what we do. Like we're weird.
yes, very good. We love it.
We're weird like that.
We love the story. It's like God was like, man, I want to play with myself. So the one became the two, and the two became four, and so on and so forth. And here we are in this interplay, in this
Yeah.
dramatic story. And that right there, brother, like that's the key when we really need to let go and take a step back because the world, it's on fire, and just like take a step back and remember that, like we chose to be here, and
Hmm.
in some weird way, we love every moment of it.
It is, and it carries like the extremes. It carries the highs and the lows. The lows feel excruciating and like unbearable, and then the highs literally are heaven. Like whatever is your imagination of pure like peace, that is what it is. I think sometimes I know I'm guilty of it. Of like, if I get into a sort of nihilistic mindset, it does the thing you're talking about with the guilt. It like goos you up into this little ball where you're only capable of perceiving like the feelings that little goo allows you to see, and you can't see anything outside of it. So then you'll have thoughts come up that say like, well, life is just a crock of shit. It's not. It's barely worth anything. Like it's all bad, and the goods don't outweigh the bads, and you'll have all these things, and it's like it's not true. You just can't remember what the highs were like. Like you don't remember in that state because you're in your little ball of goot guilt, which you come outside of it. Yeah.
It's like it's kind of cute when you talk about it like that. It's like goo guilt. It's like, aw,
Yeah,
there
yeah,
you
yeah.
are again.
Yeah.
You're so cute, and all of your depression and heaviness.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
it helps to look at. Somebody told me one time, or I heard someone say one time, like if you're, say you're in a really bad trip, or even if life is doing something where an actual like monster is coming to kill you or eat you or something, like if you can paint like a ridiculous looking face on that person, even if it's just mentally, just like turn them into a clown while they're coming at you, and you're just like, what, this thing can't, like, what's it gonna do, like, and then wait and see what it actually does, then like it's the observer effect, right? Like whether you're, the whole thing is a dream state according to me, but like the thing as it's coming at you, if you paint a clown face on it, something completely different is going to happen than whatever you were trembling about like 2 seconds beforehand.
yes, it shows us how powerful our mind is.
And then maybe you can even play with it, like maybe that thing doesn't want to be seen as like the supervillain for all of eternity, and it wants someone to talk to at some point.
Yes, yes, that's very good. Moving through the fear. I had somebody gave me a recommendation a couple days ago when I was feeling fear pretty deeply. And he was like, he's like, fear and excitement are really the same thing. He's like, how can you shift it? How
Hmm.
can you shift your perception and use that energy of fear and transform it into excitement? And the moment he said that, it was like I immediately did it. And I was just like, complete shift. And I was like, yes, that's
Yeah,
alchemy.
yeah, yeah. And you can do that with anything, like you have, like, if I'm having trouble with my ex and I'm having anger and whatever, right? Like if I'm not sitting there trying to like be angry at this person, then it literally is, it's just like you have fuel inside of your gas tank that you're either like setting to you're putting a match to it and watching it go or else like you could like stick it inside of a motor and then like drive your car somewhere, like the energy is energy, and it can be used practically, or you can just blow off steam and get mad and yell or whatever, but it's your choice once you figure out that you can do something with it. You don't have to sit
Yes.
there and just stay in anger. You can, but like there's no one forcing you to do that.
Yeah, anger is anger is a tool. It's an ally.
Hmm.
It's when we get really stuck in anger and it becomes bitterness and resentment, revenge or hatred is when it gets obviously dangerous. But
Yeah.
for me, anger is movement. Like if I'm stuck in a place where I've been feeling powerless, and then I finally allow myself to feel that anger, and I'm just charged up, and now I'm to where I've gotten, I don't project it. Like
Hmm.
I will be able to identify if I'm feeling really angry when this person said this to me, or the lack of saying anything to me at all, or I'm angry and I feel upset when I observe this person's behavior. It's triggering something within me, and now it's beautiful because now it's like for me it's like it's movement. It's a way to act,
Yeah.
and I feel we're seeing a lot of anger. A lot of people are starting to become more angry. It was like it was something that's been very suppressed.
Yeah. There.
And the Trump election, that was all coordinated and planned for their timeline agenda. But you can't fuck with spirit. You can't fuck with love. People got angry, and
Hmm.
even though they were stuck in that you know polarized thinking and just seeing things as black and white, and still stuck in that awful statism and nationalism, um, at least they're getting angry and there's some movement there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's when they get, but when, if they, that's the trick though. It's like ideally we want the masses like get angry, get pissed, go through a process. I mean, I did it before I really started to see that this is all louche. Um, I studied political science in college. And I knew the world what it was. Like I read Behold a Pale Horse by William A. Cooper when I was 16 tripping on acid. I read that book.
I don't think I've read it. Is it good?
Talk about waking up and taking the red pill, right?
Behold the Pale Horse.
And I studied political science because I was more interested in community organizing. That was like my passion. And I love to organize people. I was like, how do we bring power back to the people? Like, how do people reclaim their voice?
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like it's not just doing all the inner work. Like there has to be a certain level of work that we do, but not from the paradigm that most people are doing it within the same system. Yes, transformation and change can happen within, but it's really locked down. I see it because I work with a lot of clients who are in probation and they go through the court system, and it's just like that. It is so it feels sad for me to witness how deep it goes and how this whole system is a big setup. It's holding highest vision for that one too, that system will be transformed because we have the largest incarceration rate on the planet, and it's designed to just keep re-traumatizing and to harvesting energy from people.
Yeah, it's for profit. I caught a glimpse just from listening to some of the prisoners talk, and I've seen a little bit of the system myself. And what I see is that criminals are created. Like you're not born a criminal. They're literally manufactured. Like a set of laws is created, and then when somebody does such and so things, then, and I'm not trying to have a debate about whether murder is wrong or anything like that. I'm talking about like a little thing will be somehow exacerbated via circumstance and via other people's reactions into them feeling guilty. That's what I found, and Aurora and I talked about this too. It goes very deep, depending on how, what type of rabbit hole voyeur you are, but my own morality that I figured out is that it's a subjective, personal morality, okay? And when you're trying to have a court system objectively determine someone's guilt or not, they can do that, but that's going to be just like words on paper, and it's not going to mean a lot. Like the higher law, the spiritual law that I'm talking about, that I feel to be true, is that if you feel inside of yourself a guilt feeling for anything, and it's going to be different for some people. Like some people, due to their religious beliefs or whatever, like eating a certain type of food is going to make them feel guilty. Other people, it's not. That's the actual determinant that, as far as like higher law or maybe your own law, like if you feel this guilt feeling, then yeah, you fucked up. Like you did something wrong. You got to go back and figure it out. And that's what this is kind of a tangent, but Aurora was saying like this hammer computer that they don't want to release to the public actually does deep dives on people's DNA memory strands, and if they need dirt on a politician or something, they're going to feed the DNA into this computer, and it's going to do a deep dive, and it's going to find fucking guilt in their DNA history, and it's going to bring that up, beep beep beep, oh, they were doing this and this and this thing while they were feeling guilty, and they're going to present that to the person and say, hey bitch, like, you're guilty because you labeled yourself as guilty, and I'm going to use this because the thing knows how to read that particular emotion.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I remember years ago when I was living in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, I walked into a gas station, and like the front cover of the newspaper was how now in that state at least all inmates were mandated to give samples of their DNA. So, and I looked at that and I was like, what are they doing? I know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So the individuals that I work with who've been through the legal system, the criminal justice system, I have a couple that are diagnosed clinical psychopaths, maybe one,
Mm-hmm.
and he's an interesting one. And for the most part, all of them are severe complex PTSD. I'm gonna run with something real quick here.
Okay.
And I'm also really grateful for 144,000 lions of power that surround me as I talk about this, anchoring this space in this container. So I see a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm kind of in the trenches, right? And I'm watching and I'm seeing patterns and I'm meeting with people. I'm listening to these stories, listening to their own personal stories. But I'm also, there's always a pattern, there's always a collective story. Going back to the first thing, most of these people that I work with are really beautiful human beings that have made some pretty poor choices.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was really just pattern, recreating the trauma, the cycle of abuse that they witnessed. And, I'm not going to go into the multidimensional and what's happening behind the scenes there. I'm just going to see it as like human beings, okay, right now.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things so I work with a lot of these people. I'm watching tremendous healing happening. I get somebody in just a couple months in some of my groups. They go from really being armored and just, shut down, and just, you can see just how beaten they are. They're just being run through, like all the probation, the drug test, this and that, and this and that. And it's so many of these probation officers, it's all power and control, and the way that they are just using the system, as that their own desire to have power control. It's sick, man.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear a lot of stories, and I've had a couple interesting people, and it's become very obvious to me how many of these individuals, without their awareness, have been part of a larger collective government military experiment. Like the drug lord, one of the biggest kingpins who got busted and that I work with, whose whole family, comes from military, is written all over him, man. And seeing now the bigger strings being played, and I'm like, whoa, why did I bring this? Why did I want to see this? And that's a whole nother story, and that's a part of my own personal journey and my healing and my understanding of seeing the bigger picture in my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want to get stuck there anymore, though. That's the thing, is like, somebody posted something really good on Facebook today. Like, they want to keep us here. They want to keep us chasing our tail and going deep into the rabbit holes. And they're feeding us so much information. I mean, the fringe community is so hijacked, so hijacked.
Well,
And
it's endless entertainment.
it
Honestly,
is.
it's masturbation. Like it's titillating. It's fun and exciting. It makes you better than average Joe NPC because they don't know jack shit and they're sheep and they're blind and blah blah blah. And okay, that's good and that's fine to go on that little roller coaster ride because everybody has to do it. But at some point, if you start neglecting your own personal self work, or if you neglect your family, or if you're not even living your life anymore because you're 100% living out your little porno dystopian end of the world scenario over and over and over, then it's harmful at that point, and that's an addiction.
Yes.
And like they turn into recluses when they're dealing with this information, and it stops this thing we're doing, right? This is called community, even though we're not face to face in the flesh. It's still a community thing, right? It stops people from doing that because it's too fragmenting. Like there's too many different worlds, like hypothetical worlds out there on the web. If you're going to do research, your shit's not going to match up with someone else if you're sitting here like believing any of it, really. Like if you're solidly believing any of these things and you try to sit there and talk with somebody, if you're not just talking with them with empathy and compassion as a human being should, because you really don't know things, you just like have these feelings and stuff and experiences. If you're not doing that, then you're sitting here like you're like hoarding your little treasure box of rabbit hole details, right? And then they don't match up with the person you're talking with, so like you're skulking around, you're feeling guilty because like you think you have something special going on.
Exactly. Thank you, man. Like that needs to be spoken, and I'm grateful that you just dropped that mic for real because wow, good job. Like, when you see it, and I've seen it on forums, like, of course, like I love fringe research, and I have been collecting a lot of data around AI and transhumanism, and I'm really interested in it,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm interested in a lot of it because I love the earth, and I think the earth's super cool, and I love anything that's like natural, feral, wild, and organic, and I'm seeing the way people, how it's impacting. And so I don't think it's necessarily bad to want to research, but when it becomes this endless cycle and you start to lose, your ability to have empathy and compassion, as you said,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just seeing the other people who say, no, the earth is flat. No, the earth is a simulation. No, it's the span of all time. And people start treating each other with disrespect, and they're living from their heads and ego and arrogance. Man, you just got punked. You just gave them everything that they wanted. You know,
Exactly.
it's
Exactly.
it's a balance because those of us who are truth renegades, we have this kind of inner, longing, like we came here to dismantle. And
Yeah.
so, I understand that. I started my journey when I was pretty young. And there's times where I never lose my compassion, but I would go really deep in the wormhole, and I would become, enmeshed in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would lose my connection to my own, my own true self. And that's dangerous, and it's not worth it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like when we leave these vessels, this shell, what's going to really matter? Is it really going to fucking matter if the earth's flat or not? Nah, it's going to matter, like you said, did I show up in love? Did I contribute love to this planet? Did I live out my heart's passion and embody my art, whatever that may be? And
Exactly.
did my best as a parent or as a lover, as a friend? That stuff is so simple, but it's really what it's all about. And maybe the fringe world, it's like a lot of it is like underneath the layers. It's people seeking connection and community. I'm telling you, man, I just feel like that everything comes down to this.
It does.
You
It
know,
does. And the thing about it is that this world that we know of, right, that is fringe and it has all these crazy ass, amazing, weird, like conspiratorial components. It's it's a nice thing to have, like to be able to speak on these topics. It's not like it's like a skill set basically. If you can speak on them without getting into all the cliches and putting your hat on and all the things like you like going and hiding in the corner and uh, everything all the stereotypes, right? If you can be aware of this information and speak eloquently on it, it's an asset. It's not like a detriment. And basically just don't be a dumbass. Like don't sit there and screech from the rooftops that like Walmart stands for martial law and everybody needs to like run for the hills and whatever. Like maybe there's some truth in that, but like there's like a smarter way to go about it, to where you're not being so loud basically. Because I don't know, like I think if nothing else, I've learned that sitting here and like yelling at entities like, oh, that he's over there is doing that, like that doesn't really stop the entity from doing that thing, like very much. There's some other way to go about, if you don't like something an entity is doing, find out what causes that fucker to tick, and go poke a button or something. Like you can do that with anything.
and claim your space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
Another
put
thing that's
boundaries
coming
up.
up is one thing that as something also I observe, I've been observing this for a while, is it's actually a really it's really classic psychology, is in people are hiding behind it as a self-protective, defense mechanism, and it a lot of the times, it people are like, man, this fucking country, it's so fucked up. And I get it. Like, I'm in the belly of the beast too. I see it too. um I see the systems of oppression and control on many multiple layers and dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I'm not going to allow it to prevent me from going out into my community and just opening my heart and loving. And that's one of the tricks that I think that going down these rabbit holes will do, is we'll get into a state of deep paranoia and fear.
Uh-huh.
And, I went through this too. I had that in my late teens and my 20s. Like, I isolated myself. I went to the woods of Vermont. I went more up there like, I'm going to learn how to be an alchemist, and I'm going to sit in front of my wood stove every night and face my shit. That was my intention. But there was some reaction, because I was doing a lot of research, and it was very fear-based, and I was like, man, I got to get the fuck off the grid. And in a lot of ways that's smart, like, live close to nature. And I loved it, and I learned a lot from living there. But I reflected on it now, and I said, oh yeah, Ash, you were scared of intimacy because you've gone through a lot and you've been hurt. And that was just another way that your mind can create an opportunity to create a justification why you don't want to open your heart. And
Yeah.
it's again alienation, because ultimately, like, I was really wounded, and I have a lot of compassion. I'm really grateful to have moved out of that phase in my life, and to have really, really see what I was doing. And I encourage all of us, you know, every day take a little bit more steps closer to opening our hearts to each other. And one of the things that I feel that we do a lot is that we demonize,
Mm-hmm.
and we're that there's been such a deep paranoia. Like, is this person even human? Are they a hybrid?
I
Are they
know, I know,
hijacked?
I
Oh my
know.
God, do they have parasites?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, I'm like, wow, we have to be careful, right? We have to be careful. It's not about being dumb, but a lot of that feels reactive too, because when you are a master, when you have reached a certain level of awareness and enlightenment, you can stare the devil right in the eyes and just smile and see it. Like, you can't even be able to penetrate that person's presence. Like, I did this video about the story of Buddha on the night of his enlightenment. And it's the story where all these arrows were being shot at him, these demons,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. And, they represented, all of the sludge and the swampland of the human consciousness. And he just sat in stillness and presence and compassion and transformed that. And so again, when I see a lot of that reaction, when I observe it in my own mind, or if I feel myself pulling back a little bit, I'm like, ooh, what's here? What is this mirroring to me? Again, this is not to say, like, to be dumb, and put ourselves in energetically, very dangerous environments. Like, I've done that in my learning how to be a warrior, and I've gotten my ass kicked. And I had to, kiss my wounds the next day and be like, all right, Ashley, you got to get better at that. You know,
Yeah.
it's all good. We're learning how to do this.
There's not enough bubble wrap to protect us from what's actually out there, which is really ourselves. But ourselves are like fucking weird and multidimensional, and there's all kinds of crazy shit that is us that we don't even know is us. We're sitting here like trembling about the devil or whatever, and it's just like a shadow part of you that has been like turning in this weird corkscrew for a billion fucking years, and we've been ignoring it for the entire time, and now it's just like this like thing, we don't even want to look at it. But I've never once when I came to this space that wasn't fearful of everything, never once came back into that something that I actually felt scared of. Like I've had very powerful energy attacks and very powerful energy things that like can shake my whole space, like the space time is trying to tear itself in half, and it's very dramatic and like, but it's not scary. Like I'm not like, oh god, I'm gonna die. Like that part, I think when it's been burned out for the most part, like the world or the realm opens itself up to you in all of its like just craziness, the goods, the bads, the highs, the lows, and then the nuance of behavior when you're talking with human beings and you see like everyone's playing this little tap dance, everyone's playing their little thing, and everyone thinks like, oh, they can't see what I'm really doing. I'm here way behind all the layers, like doing my thing. Like you can see people's little spot of light moving around inside of them. Like you see what's going on. It's very fascinating.
It's very fascinating.
Yeah. And like, I can't get bored. I can't ever since I like got released from my imprisonment of a relationship 2 years ago, like it's been a different dimension every month, sometimes different dimension every day, sometimes this, sometimes that. Like I've traveled all over the place. I've traveled to Canada, went to the UK, I went to Vegas recently. I'll probably do like a country thing at some point. If the money thing releases, I'll go travel. We're gonna go travel around and just like meet everybody and see what's going on. But
the money thing has released.
Yeah. How so?
Just surrender, brother.
I think I know what you're saying. Like I've felt into that, and it has released in the sense of like it's not this oppressive mind yanking thing anymore, and it has quieted down. But I've been very patient with myself with the money thing, because that part has been so, I think in everything in the realm, that part has been the most traumatic on me, because like this thing is to me the closest that you could get to like a soul tether. Like if some creature could find out, how do we tether this being, the money thing knows you. Like the records are, it's very close to your soul essence. That's why it feels so vulnerable, and it feels like this fucking parasite worm thing is like curled up inside of your. It's what ACIM Jesus talked about. He said your altar has been corrupted. That's what he was talking about. This little worm parasite thing cozied up right next to you, like as close as you could possibly get. And it's the money, it's the ego, like it's that whole thing. And that's what we're learning how to like unwind ourselves from. We get traumatized by letting that thing die, because that thing teaches us a lot. Like it's the most traumatic thing I've ever experienced, having this mind parasite sitting here like laughing my reality to unfoldment in like terror in my face. It's the worst terror imaginable. But then once you're out of it and you see like, oh, I'm still alive, I'm still here somehow, then you have some sort of like gratitude for it, because now like it shapes my movements, it shapes my thought patterns. If I can beat that, I can beat literally anything conceivable, because that was like the most insane predator I've ever met in my life. So it's like bittersweet to let the money thing kind of become less like firm for me. So I'm just being patient, allowing just my situation to unfold as it does.
Thank you for sharing, and I relate to everything that you're saying. And this is another big core shame, and I have especially for men, a lot, because the masculine archetype is this protector and the provider. Mm-hmm. Even though it's changed and women are in the public sphere and working, like that archetype is still embedded. So I feel like men really feel it. I've witnessed men in my life when they felt they couldn't provide their children with as much, and how painful that is. Mm-hmm. And I've definitely experienced the depth of scarcity and poverty. Like I've been through it. I've been homeless. And I have been healing a lot of shame around it, especially this past year. And when I graduated college in 2008, when the recession hit, and despite all my experience and like going to great schools, it was like, boop, there was like, no, you cannot pass. And then I would just spiral out, and I would, and I had a babe, like I had a 3-year-old son at that moment, and I became a single mom, and I was so terrified. I mean, this is something that there's a little bit of a gap. Like a lot of our generation, 50% of people my age don't have children. Most of my friends don't have kids.
Hmm.
And while I know that they have sympathy, like I don't really think that they understand. And um, that was the story I was sharing for like playing for a long time. Okay, and then Ashley has another child, and then she goes through another separation, and it was like a year ago at this time where I was working for a nonprofit organization that was serving homeless youth, and I
Hmm.
was their communications director. And I made a boo boo, and I was working in some realm around geoengineering. I sent a like a letter to the editor, and within a couple days, I got fired.
Really? You, you
I
spoke your
was
mind?
I was I was I was too big of a potential risk because of my openness about these things on social media.
Mm.
So that was a humbling kick in the ass. And it's
Yeah.
okay because uh, it has led me to here. But I went through, there's a lot of interference. And again, remember, we're taking responsibility. Like we're aware that there's this hyperdimensional interference. There's all these actors and these players, and at the same time we're also, in this quantum entanglement, in this mirroring, and some of it can be really beautiful experience of just like releasing all this karmic residual shit that we've been holding on forever.
Hmm.
That's eventually what I learned. But I had a lot of challenges with getting jobs, and I was just doing anything that I could. And I was also going through this immense initiation on a spiritual level, and I was meditating a lot and journeying a lot and seeing so many things. So I was just being pulled, and there was no turning back. Like I had to dive deep and beautiful. Like my heart was just opening and expanding, all this love like pouring through me, all this light, all these codes, all these harmonic tones and frequencies. And then my outer life was just, there was a lot of nights, brother, that I did not know how I was going to feed my kids the next
Hmm.
day. Like I had $0.
Hmm.
And there's a couple friends who, would loan me some money here and there and supported me, and they got me through and they got my back. But a lot of the times there was just like these little miracles that would pop up. I'd be like crying in bed, and I'd just be like praying. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Like, I'm sorry if I've made really bad choices, but I really need support. And then it's just like a random deposit into my PayPal. Just happens. Or
Hmm.
somebody says, hey, I really appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you for your writing. Here's some money. Or that friend, I never forget it. One night I was laying on the couch, and I was like, I don't have any money for food, and I'm really hungry right now. And 5 minutes later, a friend calls, hey, can I take you out to dinner?
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the more it's like I had to go through it. I had to move through it, go through all of my trauma, my insecurities. That's a lot of that Judeo-Christian based sin shit, all those programs, um, and keep surrendering. And the more that I do that, I still live pretty much paycheck to paycheck, and I'm grateful for the income that I make. It enables me to pay my bills and to have more than what I've had. Um, and every day I get more. It gets more fluid.
Hmm.
But, some days, like last week, I had to pay a huge bill, and I was like, well, I'm just going to trust that I'm going to be able to feed my kids next week because I got to pay this bill, and I don't really got jack shit left. And
Yeah.
I was feeling a little scared, and you know how easy it is to go down that rabbit hole,
Oh
and
yeah.
how, man, that one, that, like, that's, yeah, it's messed up how much our survival programs are exploited. And it's really wrong, and it's really sad because there's a lot of suffering people in this world. And people are really afraid, and when you're only operating from a state of survival, how it's very challenging to really bring passion and art and beauty and color to this world.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
but I was
It's hard.
feeling I was feeling that nervousness that day. This was just a couple weeks ago, and I went down to do a sweat lodge ceremony. My friend picked me up because I didn't even have the money for gas to get down there. But my homeboy had my back, and we went down there and we had a powerful sweat lodge. And somebody really close to me, who I really love, who has supported me for a year emotionally and as like a warrior. He's an elder, and he is a warrior. Um, he's been through a lot. He knows a lot. He knows all this stuff, and he just said, "Ash, I just came into a bunch of money, and I really love you, and you're like my daughter." And he gave me several $100s, and I just started to cry, and I was like,
Hmm.
"Thank you, man." I was like, and so that's the shit right there. And if we can open, the more that we open to receiving love, and the more that we can give, because giving is huge, like the more that we can give. And I just think it's the energy of love. Like the more that we can give up and we can show up every day, like we are building that abundance from within,
Mm-hmm.
energetically. And
Yeah.
so the money is just a reflection of the inner abundance that's inside in our connection. And that's when life becomes a really big game changer. And we
Yeah.
need this right now, because you're right. Like I've been getting the same downloads. Like I'm ready to start traveling and weaving a web and helping to connect our tribe. This is like what my heart is telling me to do, to go and to perform and to dance and to share, to anchor light. And we need this funding, and we're going to receive it. We're receiving it right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting with the money aspect because I know internally when I am correct energetically, uh, nothing matters. Like literally nothing matters. Food doesn't matter. Not even the people matter. Like is that might sound callous, but when I'm like fully in myself in my power, like I am fully self sufficient. I need nothing. And
Yes.
if I can stay inside of that with respect to other people and building community and whatnot, that power, it's like you pass it around, like you pass it's an energetic exchange, and then the money kind of comes in as like placekeeper or something, or like the record keeping or something, so people can remember a little bit, but it doesn't any longer have this pretense that it is a thing of value, because it's not. It has nothing to do with value. It's supposed to be just a mark on a ledger, like such and so helped such and so person. Okay, mark off a check mark. That's $20 right there. But somehow they took it off the check mark. They put symbols on it. They made it into a piece of paper, and they made people think it's worth something. When even on the thing it says this note is legal debt. Like it's debt. The note is promised to pay. It's not even somehow in our minds it says, oh, this thing means something, but even with its own words it says no, it's not anything. It's a promise to pay somehow. Like it's a promise to
Isn't
give
that
value
great?
somehow.
Oh man, I love it. They're good black magicians.
Yeah.
I tell you that.
And it's got like pyramid and the all seeing eye on it, e pluribus unum. Nobody knows what the fuck this Latin stuff means. Maybe they do if they've looked into it, but like this black magic all over it, obviously, like it's some sort of spell casting system.
Absolutely, it is.
So like,
It's
but
all
but
all
when
spellcasting.
you do get into your own power, like you go beyond these magicians like thieving little tendril fingers that wanted to kind of grab you and have you be their little play toy that produces things because they can't imagine things into existence on their own, so they want to grab us and be like, do this, do that. If you get into your own power correctly, you are just past it. It's like if you're doing a dimensional rocket up from the first dimension all the way up to like the godhead. Once you got past the first dimension, all the archontic people things would look like a level of cartoon heads, just like want, 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 and you see that little dimension, which is this life, from one level up, and you're like, oh, that was just like a complete load of horse shit. they had no power the whole entire time, and it was all a mind fuck the entire time.
Yes. It's all a mind fuck.
Yeah.
Waking up from the dream, and then, a lot of the times waking up from the dream is, do I want to continue to live in a nightmare?
Mm-hmm. Some people do. Oh, they have Stockholm syndrome. Everybody has Stockholm syndrome.
Yes, this is very good. I've been talking. One of my groups that I run, I've been guiding them in understanding trauma bonding and the Stockholm syndrome, and that's been really, really great. And I was just saying the same thing yesterday. I had a friend, a Facebook friend, say, "Hey, you want to chat?" And he was encouraging me. He was seeing how I had been resisting a bit and struggling to like really let go and to trust. And he's been like, oh, Ashley, let go. And I'm like, I wrote him yesterday and I was like, thank you. I really needed that mirroring, because I have been holding on to a little stuff. And when I look at the holding pattern, it's trauma bonding.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And it's real, and it's hardwired. It's on a neurological level, a biochemical level, and it's a very, very, very real phenomena that that we should talk a lot more about, because I feel that the more that we talk about trauma bonding, anywhere from being in an abusive relationship with another human being, or from having trauma bonds. A lot of our trauma bonds mostly came, especially from childhood. We can keep going on in past lives and all that, but just for the sake of simplicity, building those patterns of trauma bonding to our abusers.
Mm-hmm.
And then it extends all the way to the system, and to all the way to, like you said, the archonic beings.
Yeah, and the trauma bonding, the bad part about it, I guess, or the most powerful part in my mind, is that if you, when you come out of your sort of multidimensional self, which to me, that's my preferred state, because it doesn't really require movement per se by me, because like I'm sitting inside of a cloud of like infinite potential, and it's self-sufficient, like I said. But the trauma bonding bad part is when you're in that cloud and then something pulls you out of it into a particular, and then you don't have access to this infinite energy anymore, so you're like, oh god, what do I do? And the trauma bonding, it isolates everything out except for what made you feel normal in that situation, or what was repeated. It pulls you back into the pattern. Whether you're going to label it good or bad is irrelevant. It does the pattern, and usually it's a self-harmful pattern, and you just do that because you can't see anything else. Like it's like you got the horse blinders on, and you can only see like the 2 inches in front of your eyes, and you're gonna repeat it unless someone comes in and helps you, or else you somehow get yourself into some thought program that allows you to access the multidimensional, even at least partially, while you're in this, because you just need something. You need to be able to somehow see outside of the blinding system somehow.
Exactly. That really is what it takes to break a pattern. We've all been there. I still get into it, and I know when I'm in it. Like I have the ability now to be in it and be like, okay, all right, we're gonna process this. We're gonna do this work. We're gonna learn how to break the pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, a lot of people are operating not, they they don't have the tools to even, like, in a lot of ways, communicate what they're experiencing. It's very sleeper like.
Well, a lot of us don't even have a rudimentary space with which to express a feeling. Like when I was in AA, it looked like something out of this world to me, because I saw a group of people sitting and talking together. Like it was like an alien sight to me. I'd never seen that before in my life. I was like, what's going on? Why are these people like, I was like, what is this weird? Yeah, it's like I had never seen this type, and they were doing this thing called love, and even that I hadn't really had much exposure to. Like, we have family and there's some sort of love going on there, but it's a different thing when, like, you have a group.
Hold on 1 second, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's different. It's different when you can see a group of people getting together simply to talk about themselves, their lives, their feelings, and with, AA of course has religious overtones, but they're like non-specific, and they're like the God of your understanding and blah blah blah. So it was better than the sort of loosh harvesting Abrahamic religions. So it was appealing in that sense, but most people don't have
hold on
anything.
1 second. I just have to respond to a text from my son.
We're actually coming up close to close here. I have somebody else on at 7.
Cool. Yeah, it is. And that's really beautiful, because even with the paradigm of AA, like, I've been to AA meetings too. Most of them I didn't really like. I started going when I was a kid with family members who were alcoholics or Al-Anon, because I was in that. And but yeah, just that you were able to be witness to a group of people just coming together and talking on an authentic level.
Yeah.
And hence this is, if we can take anything from this conversation, I feel one of our greatest tasks is, to go deeper into radical intimacy with each other and connection. So it's so imperative. I have friends mirror so much to me that those times when I do get stuck in the pattern, because there's definitely patterns I still get stuck in, I'm not aware. I'm not enlightened. I'm not a guru. I'm just human, and I'm really honest and intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And people like us, we could do kind of cool things, right?
Yeah.
But
of course,
if it wasn't for my friends who mirror to me, like I said it the other night on my Facebook Live, like, I would not be here. Mm-hmm. I would have gone under. Like, I would have done something very, very self-sabotaging, because especially in tremendous darkness and pain and fear, and just a mirroring somebody to create a safe space for me to express myself and not, to judge me.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes a long, long way. So if we have a whole bunch of people who are hiding behind, their screens every day and avoiding connection, we got some shit going on, like,
yeah,
not everybody's talking about the things that we're talking about. Like, there's still a lot of people who really get elated when they watch a Super Bowl and drink Bud Light, and they're beautiful people too. Okay, we're not going to demonize anymore. Mm-hmm. They're just still, in that system.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more that we can show up, in simple things, like just opening your heart to the cashier at a supermarket, or just reaching out to a friend that you haven't talked to in a while, or just, sending a message to people saying, hey, I love you, I appreciate you, thank you for being here. Little things like that, I feel, go a very, very long way in not only healing our reconnection, but being able to continue to transform and break these patterns.
Yeah, and they build up. Like, I haven't always been empathetic. If anything, I was much more of a stoic, pragmatic, sort of sarcastic, like bitter, angry at life. Not even so much angry, I just did this. I was like, this is just too much. Like, I can't even bother with this. I can't even figure out where to start, But when I came into what empathy is and what actually connecting with other human beings was, it's like you have in your head, like, oh, it means this, it means this. You have thoughts running through your head. They have nothing to do with what it actually feels like to, like, have a smile with somebody, or have a laugh with somebody, or have a multi-dimensional conversation with somebody. Like, there's no replacement for that. And when you're in your mode of prior to becoming, like, awakened or empathetic, all you're doing is you're living in your projections. Like, you're just living in your thoughts of the future, and you don't know you exist. And that's just what you do. Like, that's what they're all doing out there. That's why they're all going in the same patterns every single day, like with their cars and stuff, and watching the same shows every day. And, like, they don't know they exist. So our job when we're coming out of this is gently to, like, talk with the cashier or with the guy who's whose mind is on the Super Bowl, like you're bringing them very slowly back into their own actual like present self, which is where the life is, right? Like life is not in projecting out to the future. Like you can do that, but that's not where your life is.
Right here.
Yeah, it's only here. It's eternally ungraspable. You can never figure it out, but you are it. Like you are living it, and you can do stuff with it. So like go play and, you know, just it's endless exploration. When you figure out what it actually is, like when you actually awaken to what like this is, you will be endlessly fascinated. Like you can't help but be that. I can't help but be that.
I'm right there with you, brother. And you know, from the last time you and I talked through this platform, I just want to share, like, I'm witnessing a beautiful radiance and transformation happening within you.
Mm.
I'm seeing it with like all of our soul family right now, and it's really exciting. It's really an honor.
Yeah.
I feel that ecstatic joy the more that I'm breaking patterns and I'm just allowing and releasing and being in presence and opening my heart and having compassion for myself, especially, and others. This ecstatic, joyful connection is returning, and I'm feeling a lot of us, you know, moving in this direction, and it's beautiful. And I see that in you.
Yeah. I feel it. I mean, I don't always feel it, but like I don't know. It's like an unfolding. It's an unfolding of the divine. Essentially, it's like once you look at yourself, then you start interacting. Like I've, I couldn't begin to like tell an outsider what has happened with me over 2 years and how like all these people came in and how all these shows started happening. Like I have no idea. I wouldn't be able to say like what it was. I would just say like, oh yeah, I broke up with my ex, and then all of a sudden all this stuff happened, and I don't know how it happened. But
It's interesting. You and I have similar timelines there, because that's exactly what happened to me. My ex and I separated, and then it was just like the floodgates opened, and it was like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa. And I
Yeah.
felt like I was looking at all of my karma, like for all of eternity, and I just been purifying and clearing it, and yeah, unfolding in divine love and power and truth.
It's a lot, but
It is. My
I don't
mom,
know.
my mom, my mom. I think she saw something I wrote, and I love her. She's got to think I'm crazy. She's not thinking like how we're thinking, you know. But she reached out. She's like, "How are you doing?" And I was like, "You probably think I'm really nutty, but I just want you to know, God really speaks through me, and I'm okay." And she, I'm just a little concerned about you, right? Because I'm talking about how I'm having all these like repressed memories coming out, but it's beautiful because I'm really detached and being a witness to it.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, okay. I said, Mom, it's kind of like, because my mom's Christian, so I had to give her a example. And I said, it's kind of like when Jesus is getting crucified, and it's like the ego, Mom. The ego's getting crucified, and the ascension, you know. And I don't even believe in that. Like that's
Were you
not
telling
even
her
how I.
this like on Sunday, like 2 days ago? Like,
No,
relate.
I don't believe in any of that. I don't like the crucifixion programs or any of that. I'm not promoting it, but in that way, I don't give a fuck. It's her humanity and me being able to relate to her so she could feel safe, because I know that she was concerned about me,
Right.
and she knows that I've been just really pulling it all out, and I've, you know, it's life. It's human. I have kids. They're in the things, and I'm a counselor, so there's a lot of stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just really, it was sweet to connect with my mom with that, and like we're in two different paradigms, but to create that bridge of empathy and compassion. And the last thing she said is, okay, Ashley, take it slow, honey. And I was like, okay, I love you, Mom.
Yeah,
So
it's a trip trying to talk to the parents, especially if they're really Christian.
yeah, well, I'm really grateful for this conversation. I'm really proud of you. I love the work that you're doing. I love how you're inviting people to just kick it, and just,
Yeah.
you know, to anchor this stuff down, and to support each other. I always receive so much from these conversations, so I really appreciate you,
Yeah,
and
thank
anybody
you.
who
I
watches you,
I
all
appreciate
that
your
love.
voice too. Like you, I seem to have been drawn to like strong women as far as voices. We need more strong men actually, but like you, Lauda, Aurora, like you're like three very powerful female voices that like I just appreciate. I just appreciate if anybody can actually stand in their power, and I don't see too much of it, but when I do see somebody doing it, I know what it means. Like, I know what that means. I know where that person has been in order to be able to speak with that power. You don't
Thank
come
you for seeing me.
you don't come to that power uh, lightly. Like, I know you've been through the gauntlet.
Oh yeah. Yes, my friend. I've been through a lot.
Yeah.
That's gonna be a book. um, so thank you for seeing me. That means a lot. That means a lot to me. And now, more and more every day, dropping the story of myself and like I came here to serve,
Hmm.
and to dance and
Yeah.
to eat some good food.
If you know anybody, I'm still trying. The energies have been trying to stop this thing from happening. The 30 and 30. Like, I had a couple bail out because they had their own inner things going on. You're the first one that came through to start this 30 and 30. So if you would like to help with the process, if you know anybody that you think would be good on here, send them my way. And yeah, I mean, we watch each other and whatnot. So I'm really just about, like, my thing right now is building community. Like, that's the energetic track I've been on, and being emotionally vulnerable because guys have been so fucking suppressed with, like,
Yeah.
everything. Just that's what I would like to provide for people, is a chance for them to be very raw, very honest with their own story, and like, you have a chance to share in a safe space. Like, this is not like an agendaed space. This is my space, and it's pure, and you can share.
Oh, mm. I honor you. I'm proud of you. I have one person, a lot of people, but there is one person in particular. He's a close friend of mine in Tucson. Him and I are like brother and sister, and you put us two together, and we're just power. Because him and I are both really wild, and he's needed an outlet, and
Yeah.
he's got the power, like masculine power, but he's also in his heart and kind and a really amazing human being. And I think that this would be really good. So I will connect you two together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know it will. It already had, like, I have enough of a base of people to. I have, I think, 7 or 8 already signed up outside of the ones that kind of flaked a little bit. But I know, even so, I don't usually, like, put a lot of my own energy into projects, but this one I feel like particularly called to. So I know, once, if I get help from other people, it's gonna take off on its own, and I'll have probably more than enough people in 30 days. So, but any
You will.
help, yeah, would be appreciated.
Yeah, you're doing the work, man. I'm really proud of you. Thank you for being here with us. We got this.
We got
We're
it.
unstoppable.
We got it, baby.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you,
All right.
Ashley.
I send you so much love. We'll connect soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, sweetheart. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.